Hi everybody. We're just going to wait for a few more people to attend. See the numbers creeping up. Great. I think we're almost there. So hopefully everybody can hear me. Welcome to the webinar. So I'm Nadine from Treeconomics, and I would like to give everyone a really warm welcome today. I'm going to hand over to our speakers in a minute, but I just want to explain briefly how the webinar will work today. So you're going to be listening to an interview between Kenton Rogers and Dr. Mark Johnston. And Kenton will be talking to Mark all about his new book and his life in arboriculture. But just before we go there, I just want to draw your attention to your control panel, where you have a questions section. And in here, because there will be a Q&A throughout the webinar today, you can enter your questions into there and we will get to as many as we can. And the lovely Dana will be hosting our Q&A today. So she'll be picking those up. So you can start entering them as soon as you like. Actually, why don't you go ahead and put in there who you are and where you're calling in from, so we know who we've got with us today. So I'm Nadine and I'm calling in from Paignton in Devon in the UK. We've got Kenton and Mark coming in from Belfast in Northern Ireland. And we have Dana coming in from North Colorado in America. So also I will be adding links to the chat here in your control panel throughout the webinar. So you might want to just keep that open. So yeah, that's it from me. Let me hand over to our lovely speakers. And Dana, would you like to go first?
Thanks so much, Nadine. I'm really happy to be here, coming to you, like Nadine said, from Northern Colorado. And I'm really excited for this. But most importantly, if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we're going to kind of answer those as we go throughout this this conversation that I'm really looking forward to. So Kenton, go ahead, take it away, and we'll be back in a little bit. Thanks.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Nadine. And yeah, welcome everybody. It's great to be here in the Governor's Office of the Linen Hall Library here in Belfast in Northern Ireland. I'm going to be chatting to Mark Johnston, who is very much the Governor of Urban Forestry in the UK. Well, you know, it's here in your autobiography.
It's very kind of you, Kenton. Yeah.
Planting ideas in the urban forest. And as a bit of background, you know, Mark has pretty much well, it's a detailed account of your life, but also urban forestry in Britain. You set up some of the first urban forestry projects in Belfast, Dublin, London, Glasgow, Cardiff, to name a few. You set up the first UK urban forestry conferences.
Myself and colleagues, yes.
Yeah, and I think it's good that in recognition of that, you've been awarded the ISA Award of Distinction, not once, not twice, but 3 times, including the
Award of Merit.
Yeah, which is the highest accolade.
Yeah, I'm delighted. I've been very lucky.
And you're joining us here today on quite a significant date as well, the 5th of December, because it was here in Belfast that the UK Tree Equity Score was launched with Woodland Trust and American Forests and others. And that's really important as well.
Very much so, yes, very much so.
It's something we you know, I thought it was quite clever putting it into planting proposals in 2015, but actually reading your book here, it goes back a bit further than that.
Oh, rather a lot further, yeah. So I'll give you the background to that, Kenton. I first heard about this term urban forestry when I was a student at Merriswood College on my second stint there in 1976. And I was intrigued not just by the name, but the fact that it was about the total management of what we call the urban forest. And then I actually became a tree officer, a London tree officer in 1977 for the first time, and started managing trees in the London Borough of Harrow, a North London suburban borough. And it started to occur to me even then that there was an inequitable distribution of the urban forest, that in areas that were fairly poor and deprived, very few trees, and areas that were fairly wealthy, quite a few trees. I mean, it's obvious, you know, it's obvious to all of us who work in urban forestry and arboriculture, but it was a bit of a wake-up call to me then. You know, I wasn't, I'd come from the, originally from working as a forestry worker in West Wales, you know, so yeah. I was getting to know urban forestry. And it was quite interesting because, again, another wake-up call was while I'd been at Merest Wood, I'd learned an awful lot about trees, you know, tree identification, tree diseases, tree care. But when I became a tree officer, I suddenly realized there's a whole part of the job, the people side of the job, that never really got taught to me at college. And thankfully, something I was able to rectify much later in my education career. But I came across a paper in the Arboricultural Journal in 1978 by Professor John Andreessen, who was then professor and head of urban forestry studies at the University of Toronto. And he had succeeded in that post, he'd succeeded Eric Jurgensen, who was the man who originally coined in the modern era the term urban forestry and initiated the concept of it. He'd taken over from Eric. And what really struck me about this paper was it was about economics, sociology, politics. It was all about the people side. And I thought, this is brilliant, because suddenly I realized there was a whole side of my job that I hadn't learned about at college, the people side of it. And so I contacted John Andreessen. I also contacted Eric Jurgensen as well, you know, and I started building this correspondence with them, and they sent me papers on urban forestry and such, and I couldn't read enough. Yeah. So that was great, but I needed to translate that into what I was doing as a tree officer. And from the London Borough of Harrow, I became the senior tree officer at London Borough of Wandsworth, which was a very large borough, lots of staff, and great contrast in areas from very poor, run-down local authority housing estates to fairly middle-class areas around Wandsworth Common and Clapham and places like that. And when I started, the planting plans for the forthcoming planting season were already in place. But I had a bit of money to plant on local authority housing estates. And I thought to myself, well, let's start off the way we mean to go on. So I went and had a look at some of these rather run-down estates in Battersea, actually, in the northern part of the borough. And I drew up plans for planting maybe 20 trees on 3 of these estates. And I thought, you know, just begin to address this issue of tree equity. Mind you, of course, we didn't call it tree equity in those days. It was just like the right way to do things, you know, the fair way to manage the urban forest. But, and we'll come to this maybe later, but I got a rude awakening because within a week, my supervisor came to me and he said, Mark, he said, I don't know if you've been up to those estates, he said, but most of those trees have been vandalized. And I was quite shocked by this. I didn't expect anyone to thank me or send me, you know, a nice letter or something to say what a wonderful thing you've done, but vandalize them. It really made me think, and it started me off on this whole journey that has basically been my career about the need to engage with people. And we'll come to the detail of that later on, I'm sure, when we talk about community engagement and how to tackle that. But going back to tree equity, yes, tree equity is fundamental. And when I was asked to head up the UK's government's Trees in Towns 2 report, this is a government commissioned report. We had Trees in Towns 1 first off in the early 90s, and then again it was commissioned in 2004. A report called Trees in Towns 2. I was the lead researcher and main author of this. I wanted to build in this concept of tree equity because we had done a mapping study and ground survey of all the trees, and this was England. And I decided that what I would do was then correlate that to what are called the indices of multiple deprivation, which is a sociological measure of people in terms of health, education, employment, that sort of thing,
Yeah.
and do these measures. And to be honest, that was the first study that I am aware of anywhere that actually correlated tree canopy cover with the indices of multiple deprivation.
And presumably that was before GIS, so it was all aerial photography.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
quite
I think GIS might have just be coming in, but it was yes, it was because when we started thinking about Trees in Towns 3, which would be the further study, we were planning to base that on iTree and stuff like that. But unfortunately, Trees in Towns 3 never got off the ground for reasons which are explained in the book, and I'm not going to dwell on here. But I would have taken that further and developed it again. But I am so pleased that American forests in America picked up on this. I don't know whether, I don't think they even got it from Trees in Towns 2, but maybe they did. This idea of correlating canopy cover with the indices of multiple deprivation. And they came up with this thing called the tree equity score, which is to me a revolutionary breakthrough. It really, really is. And this identifies areas of priority within the urban forest. And I've always, I go back to that classic phrase that urban forestry is as much about people as it is about trees. And I use that phrase in one of my early papers. But another quote I put out there was, the aim of urban forestry is to improve the welfare of urban residents. The planting and management of trees is the means to do that. It's not an end in itself. In other words, what are we here for? We're here to make people's lives better. And I always think about urban forestry as being urban tree management with a social conscience. That's really, to me, the driving force. And that actually goes back into my childhood and my upbringing about social issues and such stuff. So it's a reflection of where I'm coming from. So yes, we would have done it in Trees in Towns 3, but American forests were there. And what's more important from the point of view here is that the Woodland Trust picked up on it. And the Woodland Trust developed the UK Tree Equity Score, which is absolutely brilliant. And you'll see it on the internet there.
We could put it in the chat actually, and it's free to use, and it covers most of the urban areas in the UK and Northern Ireland. Yeah,
it was a partnership with the American forests. I think the Centre for Sustainable Healthcare were involved as well, give them credit. But the Woodland Trust have really done a great job on this. And I was absolutely delighted when it was initially launched here in Belfast exactly a year ago. And I was so honoured to be asked to be keynote speaker to introduce that. Well. Yeah. And so that has to be one of the highlights of my career, certainly here anyway, when we actually launched that. So yeah, that's going strong. So that's tree equity, and it's been a theme, I suppose, throughout my entire career.
That's really good. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's all about people.
It's about people, yeah. I mean, trees are the means to the end. And what great, I mean, we could be doing all sorts of things, but working with trees and benefiting people doesn't get better than that, does it?
No, and you need to plant the trees in the right places.
Absolutely.
Because in forestry, the product is timber, but in the urban forest, it benefits to people. And so you need the trees where people need them. But also, I think you highlighted a point there about the vandalized trees.
Yes.
And it's important to involve the communities very early on, because people don't want trees planted to them.
No. I learned that lesson in my early days as a tree officer at London Borough of Wandsworth, whereby we went in and we planted the trees without any consultation or anything. And I realized that there was a whole new meaning to ground preparation in terms of tree planting, which involved going to residents and talking to them and getting them on side and working with them. So basically, I think we may be jumping ahead here, but I'll talk about how that got resolved. It's interesting because I at that time became a big fan of reggae music, and I got through my love of reggae music, got to know a lot of young black guys and their families, and I hadn't had much contact with people of West Indian origin before, and it was mainly on those kind of estates where they lived. And I got talking to them, and I told them about the tragic story of how those trees got vandalized. And they said to me, "Oh, listen, Mark, we can maybe do something about that, because throughout the summer and into the late autumn, we have kind of barbecues and music sessions out on the what's called the communal open space on these housing estates."
Yeah.
And all these communal open spaces were just areas of mown grass, completely bare of any vegetation, which is why I wanted to plant a few trees on them.
No shade.
Yeah, no shade or nothing. And they said, well, look, maybe for one of the last sessions of the year, we could, get the kids to do a bit of tree planting at the end, and that's what we did.
Yeah.
So it was a social event with music, quite a few cans of Red Stripe beer and what have you, and we had a great time. And the kids planted the trees, and the trees stayed in the ground for several years. Yeah. They disappeared after about 10 or 12 years, and I never got to the bottom of why that happened. But the trees actually survived and flourished, and that was very satisfying.
Good.
But that was, connecting with people.
Yeah. And so trees are your first love. Would music be your second?
Yeah. Well,
There's quite a few references in here too. Yeah, some of that. And I've got a question here actually that was sent in there from Adam Cormack, who's asking, what is your favourite reggae band?
Oh, well,
Toots and the Maytals, maybe?
Yeah, Toots and the Maytals, definitely a big fan, yes. But also many, well, obviously Bob Marley and people, but Burning Spear and Culture and Scientist and Judd Thomas, many names that most people would never even have heard of. But if you lived in South London in the 80s, as I did, these were powerful people. These were great. Yeah, it was a fabulous time. Yes, but it, I talk in there about the Brixton riots and such like. When things turned difficult, and I was just I had my daughter who was only 3 years old at that time, and thought it would be a good idea to move out of London, and that's how I began my teaching career. Yeah, no, they were great times, with the music and mixing with people of different cultures and such like. Great. And that, founded my ideas. I later wrote a paper on urban forestry in a multicultural society, which I think was one of the first papers on that subject. But that was based on experience, actually working with people. Didn't read it out of a book or anything.
Yeah, I think that's key in this book as well. It's, you're an independent scholar, and these are like practical experiences rather than academic exercise. So that's really valuable. And what I might do now actually is go over to the floor and ask Dana if there's any questions that have come in there. I can see there's quite a lot of activity in the chat there.
You can hear me, and I just want to make sure of that. But so Mark, if you could give two pieces of advice to a new urban forester about dealing with the public, this idea of just putting trees in the ground and walking away, and realizing that you have to engage the people who are going to be taking care of the trees or who are going to have the trees in their front yard or something like that. What would you say to someone who was newer to the industry and was, really bent on increasing the urban forest by planting in front of people's yards? How would you communicate the best way to people before you plant the trees? What are some of the things that you have learned?
Well, again, coming from my own experience, I realized that, you need a strategy for planting and managing trees, but you also need a strategy for community engagement, community involvement, call it what you will. And that needs to be thought through and long term. So I actually came up with this idea of the three basic elements of community involvement, which were education, consultation, and practical participation. And they're all three closely related and dependent upon each other. And that's what I would say to people, you know, study that and think about those three elements and how you're going to go about delivering them. One of the things that I found from my experience, particularly in Wandsworth, was that when we had, you know, events to engage with the public, if we just, you know, put up a notice or something, the people that would come to those events were very much the tree lovers, the people who are already, you know, sympathetic to trees. And to be perfectly honest, many of them would be white middle-class people, which is, you know, the way it was. Engaging with the South Asian community or the Black community, you need to go out, you need to reach out to them. So you need a strategy that isn't just sort of put up there, but you actually need to be proactive in reaching out to these people. So that's the education side. If you don't, you know, have that element to your community strategy, then only the people who are originally, who are on side already will actually engage. The other point is consultation. And again, you know, I found this out through my experience, again, at Wandsworth primarily, whereby, you know, we were taking down trees. It was a problem, and maybe, you know, this is complex. I don't want to go into it too detailed, but a lot of planes and lime trees that have been previously pollarded were now in a very poor state of decay in the pollard points, and we were having to fell a lot of these trees, and we were actually doing that for safety reasons. But we soon found out that if you don't notify people and explain to them what's going on and consult with them, then you're going to get some opposition. So this had actually been going on before I arrived at Wandsworth, and one of my first jobs was to address a public meeting of nearly like 200 angry residents who were concerned that the council were destroying their trees. Consultation is an essential part of that. So yes, actually going out and consulting with people, you know, from anything about, you know, where trees are planted, who's involved, the actual tree strategy and what have you. I also would say this as well, though. Don't forget, you know, somebody's got to actually, the buck stops with the tree officer in some respects. You can't allow, and I mean this in every good way, you cannot allow everybody to guide the tree management policies, because, you know, you have things to consider, for example, health and safety and all that kind of thing. So yes, you've got to consult, but you've also got to remember that the buck stops with the tree officer.
I think it's important people feel listened to, yes. And even if the answer is sorry, the tree's still got to be pruned or removed. As long as people feel like they've had a platform or a means to communicate how they feel, and it's a reasoned response, that's okay. And I think a lot of the consultation can be a bit one-sided in that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Consultation is iterative, not an announcement declaring what's going to happen, irrespective of what you say.
I couldn't agree more there, Kenton. And you know, it's quite amusing, because I would, you know, if you're consulting with the sort of the residents in the nice houses and well-treed areas around Wandsworth Common, you know, what do you think? You get plenty of responses, but going to other areas, the poorer areas, and saying, you know, what do you think about the trees? You know, say, well, why are you asking me? You know, you know, that's the council's trees, you know, and this whole idea, it's the council's trees. But I would say, no, they're your trees. They're paid for through the rates, you know, and what have you. And actually, those consultation exercises have an underlying educational agenda, because what they tell people is that, yeah, trees are important. And furthermore, your views are important about what actually happens to those trees. So it's, the two things are very closely linked. So you start getting, you know, feedback from people who wouldn't otherwise, you know, be particularly interested in their trees. Yeah. And, you know, it's an educational thing. But the third element of any community strategy has to be, you know, practical participation, giving people the chance to actually maybe plant trees themselves.
Yeah.
do the initial, post-planting maintenance or a little bit of formative pruning. It can all be taught. There are obvious health and safety considerations here, and you can't let residents just dig up the pavement. That reminds me of a wonderful story in the book about guerrilla gardeners planting trees outside their house without any authority from the council, because they were fed up waiting for the council to come and plant some trees. So one Sunday they just dug up the pavement and planted trees. I won't tell the story now, but it's in the book. It's absolutely wonderful. It caused chaos amongst the council and serious embarrassment. But no, so there, because as anybody will tell you, you start digging up the pavement, you can electrocute yourself. It's an extremely dangerous thing to be doing. So, planting trees in parks and that sort of thing is safe enough, and you can involve the community in doing that, and you can teach formative pruning as well. You can set up.
That really empowers people.
Absolutely,
and makes them feel they're doing something. Well, they are doing something really useful and proactive.
Look at the wonderful work that tree people in Birmingham are doing. Engaging with the community, giving them the chance to plant trees and feel connected that they are their trees.
Yeah, they also monitor the trees as well.
They also monitor the trees.
They check them in.
They're doing a wonderful job.
How they're doing, which is really good. And I think, we talk a lot about tree benefits and the extrinsic value of trees, but it's only through participation that we get that intrinsic
Absolutely.
value, and that's key to getting sustainable treescapes. Right?
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So yes, that's a fairly long answer to your question, Dana. But yeah, just remember education, consultation, practical participation, and there's being the three key elements and interrelated elements of any community strategy, any attempt to reach out and engage with the public.
That advice is awesome. And since I started my career as a tree planter, I wish I had known that back when I had brown hair, not gray hair. I have a couple of really interesting comments in here and a couple of questions. And this one I love. We make a point, this is a comment, we make a point of calling the trees we plant your trees when talking to residents. It's so important that they don't just see them as the property of the council. And I love that. These trees are providing benefits for your life, right? And so that's a really good way to do that. But this is a really good question. How do you balance the relation with the public when it comes to appeasing the over-invested people who feel like their opinion is the opinion, and the people who are not as invested, but you are trying to build a relationship with, and make their voice feel heard? So I think this is from Grant, and I think what he's trying to say is, there's a balance between those who think they know it all, and in the States, we have a group of people sometimes who actually, they become citizen foresters, master gardeners, and they have all that knowledge and they want to use it. And sometimes it's not always right. So how do you balance that? The vested people with the people who are not as invested in the urban forest. So
that's a great question. I'm glad you're answering it.
One of the things you learn from from your first day of being a tree officer, certainly in a major inner city area, is to be diplomatic. And I was inundated by various residents groups and civic community societies and such like, the people who were very articulate and often had nice gardens of their own, and the trees outside, they did relate to them as their trees, and and were wondering what I, as the tree officer, and my staff were actually doing, and what have you, and questioning our every step in some respects. I remember seeing, condemning a tree that was absolutely rotten. In anybody who knew anything about trees would know, that this was a danger to the public. But they weren't going to take my authority. They would say, oh, yes, that's fine, but we're going to consult an expert at Kew Gardens. And that really amused me, because I knew that any expert anywhere would tell you that this tree was a danger to the public, and I didn't hear any more about it. But you have to be kind of polite, I suppose, you know, with these people, because they do. And here's the other thing, you know, it's in many ways it gets all a bit political as well, because they have the ear of local councillors as well, particularly some of these amenity conservation groups that councillors listening to them. And you know, you have to be, you know, fairly polite in your dealings with them, even though they can be quite irritating at times. But the problem is, you know, their voices are drowning out the voices of a great many people who might, you know, have an opinion but don't have the confidence to express it, you know, or what have you. Yeah, so
it comes back to having the information and doing that consultation again in some respects.
Yeah.
I know here in Belfast with the tree and woodland strategy that was being worked on, there was public consultation, and of course what councillors think is they always hear from the people with the negatives, right?
Yeah, they do,
blocking the light, the leaves are in the gutter, and when you go out to a public consultation and get the information back, then you've got ammunition in your strategy to say, well, actually, look, we consulted, there were 760 respondents, and 98.4% of them are actually in favour of the trees that are outside their property, and that can be really useful too.
I would, you know, say to people, please read the chapter of the book about my time as a London tree officer, because, you know, you will get an insight then and into all the competing interest groups that, you know, make life interesting for a tree officer. And I know tree officers in post will love reading it, because so much of it will echo their own experiences. You have to be diplomatic because you are a public servant, but sometimes, you know, you have to bite your lip, and you have to make special efforts to reach out to those people that aren't engaged.
That's
Was
great.
there anything else from the floor, Dana?
Pardon?
Was there another question out there?
Yeah, I'm going to do this question, and I'm going to jump off and let you guys go on to your next section. But as a career observer of the urban forest, what have you observed as regards to impacts of urban forests by climate variability and change? What are your thoughts on interventions available to help tree decline? That's kind of a broad question. I'm going to jump off and get some more questions, and I'll be back.
Thank you, Dana.
Can you explain that one to me? What was that?
I think what's going on is, yeah, how will climate change impact on the tree, and what tools and resources or experiences do you have that would help mitigate?
We're going to have to adapt to that, obviously, and I suppose the first thing that comes to mind is tree selection, and how we're you know, going to have a broader palette of trees that we plant in the urban forest that can adapt to those changes, those climate changes. And it's not just you know, drought and such like, although, you know, trees that obviously have less water demand are going to be important, trees that can, you know, suffer higher temperatures. But another factor which you know, comes again from my time as a tree officer is the ability of trees to withstand high winds. A lot of species, you know, the wood is quite brittle, you know, so planting poplars and willows in streets is not a great idea, particularly as the winds are, you know, becoming stronger and more regular. Interestingly, it's forecast tonight in Belfast, you know, that we're going to have high winds again. It's becoming more frequent. So in all sorts of ways, you know, we're going to have to adapt our planning and management of the urban forest to meet those challenges that come with climate change in urban areas. So yeah, there's a whole range of things, and you know, narrow ideas about only planting native species, you know, really should be, you know, consigned to history in terms of urban areas now. We're going to have to be a lot more imaginative. You know, we don't want to take chances with invasive, you know, species or anything like that. We need to, you know, be fully conscious of what we're doing, but we have to be, you know, more imaginative, you know, and meet those challenges. But there's a lot of good work being done on that, you know, and you know, guys, some of them that are working on, you know, this whole idea of species selection for urban areas, and a lot of good work been done recently on that.
Yeah, there is Andy Hirons and
my old colleague Andy Hirons,
yeah.
Great, and Henrik Soman, and yeah, that's great.
And I think we do need to hedge our bets with a wide variety of exotics.
Absolutely,
because we talk about climate change and global warming, but actually for us in the UK, that it could plummet for a few years. The temperature, you know, we could end up with worse weather.
It's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge.
So one of the things I wanted to chat about in your book, because what really comes through, Mark, is the creativity and you know, your artistic streak and the work where you engage with PR experts.
Oh yeah.
And there was one story in particular I loved in this book, and I think it was in Wandsworth again, but it was to launch the
that was the launch of the Forest of London project.
The Forest of London. And there was a tree to be felled, and you invited the cameras and the newspapers down, and the tree felling became the launch of
the Forest of London project.
On its head. It is. But what a dramatic thing for people to see a tree crashing down.
It's certainly.
And then you got a fantastic scoop there. I think we've got a photograph. Well, tell the story.
Let me give you the background to that, because in around 1982, I was reading the proceedings of what was only the second American National Urban Forestry Conference. First one was in '78, second American National Urban Forestry Conference in '82. And there was a paper in there by a guy called Andy Lipkiss, who had established an organization in Los Angeles called Tree People. And they then went on to develop a project called the Million Tree Project, or the Urban Forest Campaign, popularly known as the Million Tree Campaign, to plant 1 million trees in Los Angeles for the opening of the Los Angeles Olympic Games. And interestingly enough, Andy had started the organization, but when he met a lady called Katie Urban, who became Katie Lipkiss, and moved to Los Angeles, Katie had been working in London in media and marketing. And she had worked under a guy called Don Bowen at a major London agency. And Katie brought to Andy's project in Los Angeles all this knowledge about advertising, marketing, media, and such like. So with Andy's charisma and visionary approach and Katie's knowledge of the media and what have you, the project just really took off. And it was the first major citywide, you know, urban forestry project that used media and marketing expertise. And I was just loving it, you know, from a distance. And at the end of the project, Andy and Katie contacted me. I was in regular touch with them. And they said they were coming over to London and just to give a presentation to a small group of people. And the person organizing that and hosting their visit to London was Don Bowen. And so I, along with about 30 other people, met at Don's marketing agency in the center of London, and Andy and Katie gave a presentation about the work of Tree People. And Andy knew that I was working on sort of urban-based community projects. And at the end of the evening, we were just, Don, myself, and Andy were talking away. And Andy said to me, he said, Mark, you know, you could always do something similar, you know, in London. And I sort of laughed and I said, well, I'd need a great deal of help, particularly on the media and marketing side. And Andy said, well, the man is standing next to you, if you can convince him. And I left it at that. But at the end of the evening, I said to Don, I said, do you want to talk about it? And he said, yeah, well, we'll talk about it. And so I met up with him a few weeks later. And that is the birth of the Forest of London project, which we called the Forest of London, so after a brainstorming session there. And it was absolutely, you know, really exciting. You know, it was London's first citywide urban forestry project. But again, it was the media and marketing expertise, thanks to Don, and I soon learned the ropes with him, that you know, really cut into the media coverage, you know. Yeah. And the first thing we did, as you may know, was the Richard Branson tree climb.
You got another tree.
Yeah, we linked up with an organisation called UK 2000, And I was given the services of Richard Branson for a morning or a couple of hours to do whatever we liked, you know, to promote our Forest of London project. And I thought, getting Richard Branson to plant a tree is pretty boring, you know, let's do something exciting. So I put it to Richard, I had his number, and I phoned him up and I said, how about climbing to the top of the tallest tree in the centre of London? And Richard said to me, yeah, it sounds great, Mark. You know, I loved climbing trees when I was a boy. And I said, actually, no, slowly. It's more like mountaineering these days. You need a rope and a harness, and I literally need to show you the ropes. So actually, to cut a long story short, I spent the day with Richard at his house just outside Oxford, giving him a demonstration of how to climb trees. And it's in the book, I won't dwell on that, but the Richard Branson tree climb, you know, we got national media coverage. We were on the 10 o'clock news. We were on several national newspapers covered the story and what have you. So that was a pre-launch event. That was actually instrumental in getting us, you know, significant amounts of sponsorship. So then we had to launch the project itself. And having got this reputation for doing things slightly off the wall, I sat down with Don and we said, well, what do we do with the launch? You know, you can't really follow the Branson tree climb with a tree planting, you know, how do we do this? And Don was brilliant. He said, look, get back to basics, Mark. What is the essential message of the Forest of London project? What are you trying to get across? And I sort of gave it a bit of thought and I said, the essential message is that many of London's trees are old and dying. And unless we act now to do something to plant the Forest of London of the future, you know, we're in trouble. All right. So hang on a sec. Why don't we demonstrate that by felling an old and dying tree? So I contacted the tree officers, inner London tree officers, and I said, you know, can any of you come up with a tree that's in a public park, away from a road, that's old, dying, and has already been condemned? And it was London Borough Hackney, I think, in Clissold Park, came up with a horse chestnut tree that, you know, had been condemned. You can see that there's a picture of it in the book, that, you know, the canopy was dying back and it had been condemned. And as soon as I went to inspect this tree, the second part of it fell into place, because we didn't just want to fell a tree, we wanted to end on a positive note. I realized that this was a horse chestnut tree and there were conkers up there. What better to fell the tree and then get school children to come in and collect the conkers and pot them up for the future trees. So that was the theme, and it was, again, you know, national media coverage for this, and you know, spectacular event. It certainly turned a few heads among the tree establishment. What on earth is this boy doing, you know, launching a tree project by felling a tree? But it caught the imagination. And if we put up that image, photo, this is what really made the day. Don said to me, you know, we may get a lot, you know, if we're going to get a lot of media coverage, it's going to be an image. So we just want one image that says it all, basically. And he said, I know exactly what they're going to be doing, the photo. And I said, what's that? And Don said, just wait. The press boys will know exactly what to do. And that's the image that appeared in the Times newspaper the following day. And it just blew me away, really. And the headline in the Times was, fallen chestnut gives seed to new forest. And I thought, perfect, absolutely perfect. The young girl with the conker seeds in her hand against the background of the fallen giant. It's brilliant, isn't it?
It's a great piece of PR.
But yes, and that's what, you know, going back to the story of tree people, that's what I learned originally from them. So, you know, a lot of things that we learn, we pass on to other people. And maybe somebody's going to look at that today and think, yeah, that's great. Well, funny enough, when they launched the Forest of Oxford project, they did pretty well the same thing. They thought, that's a great one, we'll do something similar. So yeah, you know, we learn from each other. But that whole idea of using advertising and marketing expertise to get your message across, was absolutely crucial. And Don and I just worked brilliantly together. It was really, really good.
Thank you. And Dana, we're going to go back to the chat now.
Yeah, there's a couple really good. Yeah, there's a couple of really good comments or questions in here on around community engagement. One of them is from our friend Nathan, who said, kind of what have you ever attended communal gatherings such as church, what we have over here called Veterans of Foreign Wars, and other areas of interest as a method to improving community engagement, which kind of goes along the same lines as with Nadina's question, which is based on what Mark has seen throughout his career. What newer innovations has he seen to better engage the community? I don't think there's a better innovation than felling a tree to launch a project. I think that's a little different. And I can hardly wait to read that in the book. But just some more ideas around community engagement would be great.
I think it's important to work through existing structures and reinforce them as well, rather than maybe creating new structures. Reinforce existing community groups and community structures. And it depends exactly where you are, how this can come about, and knowing the social sort of makeup of a particular group or an area, and working with that. I would just comes to mind actually a project that I did in rural Ireland. One of the first projects when I first came to Ireland, we decided, I was working with an organisation called CRAN, which was setting up, retreeing Ireland with mainly native species in a rural context. But we had the idea of planting up the main street of a little town called Carrigallen in County Leitrim, and getting the community on side. If this was particularly important, as I was, a bit of an outsider, that obviously from my accent and what have you, that we needed to make friends within the community. And so, the first person I went to see was the parish priest. And I chatted to him about what I was doing. And, we were going to get, we had a training scheme, a forestry training scheme, and it was young people that were taken off the dole queue. And they were the people that were going to do the work, but with the local community. And I convinced the parish priest, of the value of this. And the next Sunday at Mass, at the end of the Mass, he stood up and he said, I just want to tell you about a wonderful project that some people are trying to do. And everything then fell into place. We got a local builder who, provided the bricks, somebody with cement, and people with trees and stuff, and the whole community came together. But you're working with existing structures and with existing, so I wasn't sort of going against the grain. I was, so that, I think that was an important lesson for me. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. Work with what's there already and what obviously works within any particular community. So, in that part of rural Ireland, that was the way to work. And in inner city areas, with ethnic communities, reach out to community leaders, people already, representing the interests of their community, get them on side, ask their advice about the right way to proceed, So it's all a learning lesson.
Yeah, and like in your book, there's that connection with music, and the other connection, there's two good connections, music and food.
Yeah, yes.
So I know it's not I don't think it's in your book because I haven't got through it all yet, but I think it's Pittsburgh, there's a project called Plant a Tree Beer for Free.
Oh, sounds great.
Yeah. So,
yeah, no, it's they're all very imaginative ideas, aren't they? Yes. No, in that paper that I wrote, and I think it was back in 2000, I presented it at the ISA conference that was held that year in Montreal, called Urban Forestry in the Multicultural Society. I talk about, all the pitfalls to avoid, if you're organizing a community event, particularly when you're serving food and stuff, it has to be kosher or it has to be, what have you. Be aware of the community sensitivities. There was a classic story, wasn't there, about Keir Starmer organising that, was it recently for Diwali and in 10 Downing Street, and they forgot about the food rules. You need to do your research, and work with communities and what days are good and what days aren't so good and all that kind of stuff. So, I know that paper now is like 20 years old, but I would still say it's, it still has the basic points about working with different communities and going with the flow.
Yeah. And I'll just mention in Mark's free ebook, in the back of the book, there's an appendix with all your papers listed, aren't they?
Yeah,
so they can be
selected list of
and download.
Yeah. And also, if you go to the website, there is a thing there which is linked to academic resources, and you can access. They're all on a site called ResearchGate, which you can download for free. All my papers, but listed in the book something like 60 odd different papers, magazine articles, a selection of what I thought were the better ones over the years. Yeah. But hopefully that will be a useful resource, but yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Any more from the floor, Dana?
I've got a couple here that I think one goes along with this one and one's kind of out of, I think it's a future question. So let me ask this one first. Council budgets for tree management are always stretched. Does improved community engagement help increase the budget? I think it's a great question.
How can increased community?
So councils and local authorities, municipalities are often cash strapped. How can engaging with the communities help to increase funding in the urban forest or increase the budget for the?
Well, I suppose the bottom line is that councillors listen to their communities when they draw up budgets, and if trees are popular, are thought to be of significant concern, then funding is provided. Councillors tend to go with whatever will get them votes to get them re-elected, and so community engagement is the best way of of generating interest and support for the tree service. The tree program. So that's a very good way. Bottom line is councillors decide on the amount of funding that you get, and if you've got popular support for the tree program, councillors listen to that, and will vote money for your tree management program. The other way is also one of the things that we developed firstly in the Forest of London project, where we had local community support teams that provided community engagement on the ground. One of the roles of those community support teams was to generate funding, to try and hold events and such like that would, generate funds for tree planting and such like. And, that was when I set up a tree warden scheme here in Belfast in the early 90s. One of the roles of tree wardens was to generate funds for their own local tree planting, approach local businesses, would you like to contribute, and we'll give you a bit of publicity and such like that. So different ways of funding the tree program through community engagement. First and foremost, get popular support, because that's translated into political, will that votes in the money for the budget.
Yeah.
But at the same time, seem to be proactive. One of the things that I was very proud of in the Forest at Belfast project, in the first year that we were freestanding, we got a central government grant to run the project of about £40,000, but I actually managed to generate sponsorship of the same value. And so you go to government and say, we're very grateful for the money, but at the same time, we're also matching that with what I raised through commercial sponsorship for the project. So yes, the idea that, it's increasingly the case now, tree officers have to be seen to be proactive in helping, to fund their own. That's the two ways to do it. Popular support among the community translates into political action, but also, funding for local tree planting among community groups and such like.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And whilst we're on that subject of funding and local authorities being kind of cash strapped, but at the moment there's a lot of sort of new funding for tree planting. There's a lot about tree planting, but I think looking out to the industry, there's definitely a shortage. There's a skills gap. A lot of the older colleges and certainly where I studied, that's all gone now pretty much. Where are our future urban foresters and tree officers, and where they're going to come from?
Where they're going to come from, yeah.
Did you have any insights?
Two things there, let me just first, comment on the local authorities being strapped for money, because we have, literally been through 10 years of austerity, in terms of, government funding for local authorities and what have you. And sadly, we have seen many tree officers, lose their posts or basically give up and transfer to the private sector, set up as consultants. And there was a skill shortage within local authorities of experienced tree officers, and it's pretty disconcerting. I know from, I spent on and off nearly 20 years in education, and particularly in my time at Myerscough, where we ran a BSc honours degree and a master's degree, we had no shortage of people coming on the course. It was great, and really top quality students as well. I hear that is no longer the case, in terms of many of the colleges that used to run courses in arboriculture have stopped running those courses. Many of them are online courses now, and taking, a lot of their students are overseas who don't actually come to Britain, so they're obviously benefiting their own countries, but where are we going to produce the homegrown tree officers of the future? And it's worrying, I must say, it's worrying. I would just say that our professional organizations really need to sort of be taking the lead, and particularly as, concern about the environment among young people today is probably greater than it's ever been. And, what a wonderful job, to be, a tree officer in local government, responsible for managing the urban forest of a town or part of a city, and preparing, the urban forest of the future, working with communities and such like. It's a wonderful job. I know it can be very difficult, and it has been very difficult in those times of austerity, but, we need to go and sell it as a career choice, and, hopefully, train up those people. But when I heard that, there were these problems of succession in the arboricultural industry, and particularly worrying people going into the public sector. There seems to be a lot of people in the private sector. In fact, many consultants. I've heard the story, that people are coming in and undercutting them. But in the public sector, we really do need to address this, and I think that's something that our professional organisations need to be looking at. I know they are looking at it, but we need a real action plan.
We do, and it's a career where you can have a really lasting impact and leave a fantastic legacy.
Believe you me, it's a wonderful career.
Yeah, thank you, Dana. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour. Is there time for another question?
It was interesting. You actually answered the question that I was going to ask, because somebody asked what's next. Who's going to do this? So I really appreciate that as a gray hair in the industry. But I'm going to turn it back over to Nadine, and she did say that we weren't able to get to all of the questions in the chat, and we'll try and answer those as much as we can. So Nadine, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Dana. Apologies for showing that image 3 times.
Not showing enough, Nadine. It's lovely.
I was asked to show it whenever that particular project was mentioned, and it was mentioned about 3 times, so I just put it up. So anyway, you got to see lots. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the discussion today. Just to let you know, the webinar was recorded, so this will be on our website, treeconomics.co.uk, by end of play on Monday, so you can share it or you can rewatch it. I also want to mention that our next webinar will be taking place on the 16th of January, and this one is all about tree establishment strategies. So we will be looking at UK and US approaches to tree establishment, questions for planning over time and at scale. So if you want to join that one, we'll be looking at some real case studies as well. I'm going to pop that link into the chat just now. There we go. And also, yeah, so thanks very much to our speakers, Dr. Mark Johnston and Kenton Rogers, and to our Q&A host, Dana. You've done a wonderful job, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you again, Mark. I'm looking forward to finishing this over Christmas now.
Like I say, it's a free ebook. You know, it's my thank you to 50 glorious years in the tree world, and it's there as a free download for anybody who wants it. And you can get printed copies, but they're at cost price. Although the postage may vary in different countries, it's at cost price. I always prefer an actual book personally, but the ebook is absolutely free. And I have to say, many people have downloaded it already, and I'm getting great feedback. But you know, please, it's out there. Enjoy.
And the web address for that one again is markjohnstontrees.com.
Indeed, markjohnstontrees.com. I think you've got the slide, have you?
Yes, I will just share that one again. There we go.
It's not difficult. Just have to remember that it's Johnston with a T, Scottish.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you everyone so much, and have a lovely rest of your day. We're going to close the webinar now.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.